Today is our first ever Resilient Studies Consortium interview. I'm Jordan Spordone. I'm here at Paul Smith College with Deb Naybor, who is a professor of environmental science, an inspiration to a lot of students, and just a great person. So Deb, can you give us a little background of yourself?
Sure. I actually grew up in the suburbs of Long Island, so not what you would call in the midst of the wilds. But every opportunity I could, I ran to the top of the hill and disappeared into the forest and built forts with sticks and pretended that I had run away permanently and was living the life of my side of the mountain in a hollow tree with a peregrine falcon on my arm.
Oh, I like that.
I was into scouting, so I went backpacking a lot with the Girl Scouts. I did learn to camp because my family really had no attachment to the outdoors or doing things outdoors. And then I decided I really wanted to go into wildlife management. I applied for a couple of colleges, and the more I looked into it, the more I realized that a lot of wildlife management was not saving extinct species or managing wildlife for the good of all. It was often for hunting or other things that really wasn't what I wanted to get into. It was often more about law enforcement than the science of it. So I applied to Paul Smith College and came here for forestry for 2 years, decided 2 years was all I wanted to go to school. And after I graduated, I became a land surveyor for 30 years because that was the job that was there.
Yeah.
Ended up going back to school after running my own business for 30 years and ended up teaching at the University of Buffalo. And was able to kind of manipulate the courses that I taught into talking more about natural resources and less about just basic geography. And then in 2015, I got hired by Paul Smith to come back here and teach in all kinds of departments.
Yeah. And thank you for that. Oh, that's great. So yeah, that sounds like your background, always centered around the environment one way or another. What inspired you to take that path?
I have to say that I just always found getting into nature as an escape. And it was always, I always felt like I was dropped at the wrong house in the suburbs and couldn't wait to go live in the Rocky Mountains. I think some of that came from scouting because we did have leaders that were into the outdoors, but some of it was just my own exploration of picking up dead things and dissecting them in the basement and my curiosity.
Look what I got. Yeah. One of those. Cool. Oh, cool. I know everyone's story is a little different, but as an RSC fellow, my job with this, my mission for this YouTube channel is to find people who are inspired by the outdoors and just hear their story and their perspective of environmental resiliency, especially in these times of, climate change scare and everything. So I was here to ask you today, how would you define environmental resiliency?
So from my point of view, resiliency has different levels. We have, of course, the policy level. We have the resiliency of an entire nation or the entire world.
Right.
My focus has always been on the very local or personal level of resiliency. If each individual or each local community would build their resilience to match their own geography, their own economics, their own personal belief system, then the whole planet could become resilient just by all these little individual pockets adding up to one greater whole. So that's where my focus has been.
Cool. Yeah, no, I like that individual practice idea. So one person can actually make an impact. Do you believe you fit into this personal criteria?
Yeah, I've always tried. There's times when you don't have control over some of the things that you're doing, such as where you live. My first built house was 2,300 square feet. but we used logs. It was a log home. It was as much renewable
Yeah.
material as we could, as much natural material as we could use. We planted an orchard. We managed our forest. And then, at this point, I've downsized to 280 square foot, and I live the tiny house lifestyle, no running water, try to manage the forest as best I can, and now trying to pass that on to students, that if you have a sustainable lifestyle, you can be more resilient to any change and have less impact on the environment.
Yeah, no, that's great. I like that. Definitely going to follow that tiny house lifestyle. I think it's worn off on me a little bit.
Good.
So then, is there a key practice to being resilient against climate change?
So, yeah, I mean, unless we change human behavior, I teach about the technology that's coming, the different types of alternative energy that's being developed, such as wave kinetic energy or improved solar or wind power. If people don't adopt that and don't make a commitment to either do it individually or to pressure their locale or their larger government to subsidize or enforce the use of more resilient types of energy or living, then we can have all the technology in the world, but if people don't use it, it's useless.
No, I like that. I agree totally. We can talk about the problems, but it doesn't solve them, that whole thing. So what is your personal goal in combating global warming?
So I've worked overseas quite a bit in Asia and in Africa, working with people that are in developing countries. And, one thing I always saw with them was the idea that they wanted to attain the American lifestyle. And that scared me because the American lifestyle is overuse and waste and everything else.
It is, yeah.
In those areas, they use everything. They do the best they can. And they do something now, which I've seen when I started there almost 20 years ago, working in Africa, for instance. They couldn't afford to get wires for electricity run to the village, so no one had electricity. Then solar panels came, but they were very expensive. They couldn't afford them. Today, solar panels are much cheaper, so for $500, they can get a solar power rooftop unit for their small house in the village. They can get a battery, and they can have electricity.
Right.
The problem is they want the next level. They want cable TV and smartphones and washers and dryers. And that worries me with the population growing, especially in those areas.
Yeah, how that affects them there.
And yet, how can we say to them, well, you don't deserve to have what we have?
Yeah, right.
So
To
the
make
idea is to get them to think of it smarter rather than just want what we have.
Yeah. So your goal, you would say, is to, I don't know, study that? Or?
Now my goal, because I started teaching, now my goal is to educate my students. I mean, at this point in my life, I can only make so much more change.
Right.
And so now my concept is, if I can influence the next generation to think of it in these terms, to think of not always wanting the next thing, even in their own lives. Right. And to individually live a sustainable lifestyle, but also think about how they can support more resiliency.
Right, yeah, I like that. Yeah, minimalist, but still being happy.
Yeah, and it doesn't even have to be minimalist, but just constant eye on what are the things you don't really need.
Right, need. Yeah.
You don't have to live in the dark and only have kerosene lamps, and we all need internet these days. But the average person under the age of 40 owns 3 smartphones now. They've got 2 in the drawer that they consider obsolete, and they've got another one that they use. So.
Yeah. I need to know, so I need to have all those.
That's right.
But in a world with so many problems like that, why even, I don't know, what motivates you to try to educate people? Wouldn't it be easier to take an alternate route?
Yeah, honestly, there's days when I just like to disappear into the woods and do my own stuff without showing up to work every day to try to convince people, especially on some days when people don't seem to get the message.
Right.
But I've seen some great success stories, like you, like Matt Merritt, just see their brains kick in and start to think about how this could work. I think people your age are having a better idea of how the planet works and how climate change impacts us. Even when I started teaching here 5 years ago, when I asked people to raise their hand in class and say, how many of you believe in climate change, only about half the class did. Now I would say everybody raises their hand, although they still may have different levels of what they believe their personal impact is.
Right. And it's like going with the flow versus actually, being...
Yeah, and just seeing a change from a freshman to a senior, and, you think they aren't learning anything sometimes, and then all of a sudden they get to their capstone or to another project, and you see that you have changed the way they think, so it's worthwhile.
I like that change. They change themselves, and maybe they can change. So would you say that an individual effort makes an impact?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Just in my own life, I was thinking today, probably I've been teaching maybe 8 or 9 years now total, and I probably had 3,000 students in different parts of the world even. And, some of them stay in contact with me and still tell me they remember when I said this or that, or they thought about making a choice that was influenced by what I said in the classroom. So that definitely makes it worthwhile.
I like that. I call it the ripple effect.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. As a last, question here, what's one piece of advice that you would give to a student or someone or anyone here?
So just balance your choices in life. I know I talk to a lot of students about career choices. Everybody thinks you get a college degree and you get that piece of paper and the job of your dreams is going to be presented on a silver platter, making 3 times as much as I make.
Oh yeah, here we go.
And be in the perfect place. Everybody wants to work out west. Everybody wants to work in the national park. Everybody wants to, be out in the woods. I know I did. But just realize that sometimes your path isn't that easy. I ended up exactly where I'm supposed to be, but this never in a million years is where I thought I'd be or what I thought I'd be doing.
Right.
But even making choices in your day-to-day life, do I recycle? Do I not recycle? Do I buy a new house? Do I buy a used house? Do I make my car last a few more years? Or do I turn around and get something that's going to run without constant repairs?
Right.
Do I live in my car for 3 months, or do I decide that I'm going to get an apartment with all the amenities?
Right. Yeah.
Just realize that in part, I believe you're going to end up where you're supposed to be, and that some of these choices we sweat over in the long run don't really make that much of a difference. But if you just keep resiliency in mind, your personal resiliency as well as climate resiliency, and use that to kind of guide you along the way, you'll end up where you're supposed to be.
Oh, that's great. I couldn't have said that better. Kind of have to debate everything that you're, that's a lot to absorb.
What color socks should I put on today? Do I wear the ones with bees, or do I wear the ones with stripes?
Or both,
Could make a difference.
Yeah, now it's the mask. Which masks should I wear today?
Yes.
Well, that's all I needed for today, and I want to thank you for being here and taking the time out to do this with me. So,
awesome.
Yeah, that's it. Signing out.
Hey, hang in there. Let me know what's going on out there.
Yeah. Can they contact you?
I'd love it. Yeah,
Sure.
just if they have any questions. My email address is best. You can contact me at dnaybor@paulsmiths.edu. So I'm sure Jordan can put us in touch. If you have any questions, anything I can help you with, if you just want to tell me what you're up to, I'd love to talk to you.
Yeah, that's Paul Smith College, Professor Deb Naybor. I'm Jordan Spordone, Resilient Studies Consortium Fellow. Thank you for listening.